Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank also everyone who spoke tonight and have sent us emails sharing their thoughts on this ordinance and really sharing their feelings and their stories about experiences that they have had. It was powerful testimony. When we voted on this back April 29th, there were sort of three main concerns that were raised that resulted in the call to delay the deadline until 2027. One was the concern around losing parking around on Main Street around Newtowne Court. My understanding is that has been resolved and that there will be no net loss of parking spaces around Newtowne Court. Is that accurate, Commissioner McKenna?
Commissioner McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think we're talking about net loss of residential parking spaces.
Correct.
So yes, we're making sure that there will be no net loss of residential parking spaces.
Okay. The other concern raised was the PTDM ordinance, right? And that councilors wanting that to be in place prior to any construction happening on Cambridge Street and Broadway. We're taking care of that as we just discussed, and I appreciate Councillor Toner. I know he's been talking about this a lot, as he said, in terms of North Cambridge. We can get this through ordinance relatively quickly. So that concern is off the table. And so it leaves sort of this last piece, which is just the extension itself. And one of the concerns raised was about giving the city more time to engage in a process and to do Cambridge Street and Broadway in 3 sections, I guess you could say, as opposed to doing it all at the same time. So just a couple questions. So that's sort of the only outstanding thing in my eyes right now. We've taken care of the parking around Main Street. We've taken care of the PTDM, or we will. So we've heard a lot of folks tonight, over 100, talk about not extending the implementation deadline from the current deadline that is in the CSO, which would certainly be my preference, and I think that's why myself and Councillor Siddiqui, Sabrina Wheeler, and Azim brought in that amendment back in April, or wanted to keep it on the current timeline. But my understanding, and Commissioner McKenna, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that because we haven't moved forward really with any construction since then, we can't meet the current deadline that's in the CSO, so it has to be extended, and then the question becomes extended to when? So I guess the direct question through you, Madam Mayor, is can you meet the original deadline in the CSO at this
Commissioner
point?
McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, at this point, because of the delays over the past year, we cannot meet the original May 2026 deadline.
Okay, so through you, Madam
Vice
Mayor.
Mayor.
So the question, again, now comes back to how much of a delay. So when we discussed this in April, the city at that point said it could meet the original deadline, and we now know that that's no longer possible. And the extension to 2027, and I just want to clarify this because there was some confusion, that date and the language that came forward from the city for that date was because some councilors asked the city if they wanted to extend the deadline to 2027, what language would they need in order to do that? That was not that request to go to 2027 did not come from the city. The city was not asking to extend to 2027. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, correct.
Okay. So, and during those conversations, we had asked if the city could, if there was going to be a delay, a compromise that was put out was to delay until 2026, and that would require the city to do the implementation in 2 phases rather than 3, but not in 1 phase, as a compromise. And the city at that point said, yes, you could do it in 2 phases by 2026 as opposed to 2027. Is that still the case, given how we sit today?
Commissioner McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes. Sorry, that was a little loud. At this point, we could meet the November 2026 date that has been floated, as well as meeting the November 2027 date. Okay. Either of those would work.
Through you, Madam Mayor. And Commissioner McKenna, if the timeline is changed to November 1st, 2026, do you believe that you'll have enough time to address some of the issues that have been raised, such as what are we going to do about loading zones? What are we going to do about handicap spots? What are we going to do about some of the more problematic intersections? Are those all things that you will be able to look at and address if the deadline were to change to 2026?
Commissioner McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes. Regardless of whether the deadline ends up being November, and I would ask for the end of November if we could get that either year, we'll do the same kind of thorough process along each corridor with a lot of public outreach, a lot of business outreach to work out all of the best curb uses. We'll give the same level of attention to the design details along the entire corridor, including intersections, regardless of which timeline we're on.
Okay. So,
Mr.
Madam
Mayor?
Mayor, through you. So, given that we've addressed the concern that was raised around Main Street, we addressed the concern that was raised around the PDDM, given that we can no longer meet the initial timeline and there needs to be an extension, given that the city is not the ones requesting to go to 2027 and can accomplish what they want to accomplish by going to 2026, November 1st, 2026, and given that our own data shows that separated bike lanes reduce crashes, and we're already not only dealing with intersections on Cambridge and Broadway through this process, but we're actually looking at the most problematic intersections around the city through another process. So what we're talking about here are bike lanes so that things like we heard tonight in terms of people getting doored and falling into the street and getting injured, that those things will not happen as often. We can never say never, but we know by our own data that these bike lanes reduce these crashes significantly. I'd like to move the amendment that was submitted by myself, Councillor Siddiqui, Councillor Azim, and Councillor Sabrina Wheeler to amend the ordinance put forward in City Manager number 10 to change November 1st, 2027 to November 1st, 2026. I think this is given that it delays the implementation the way some people want and some people don't. It does not delay it as much as some people are asking for, and we still get to accomplish all the goals that the city is able to accomplish by 2026 as they are by 2027, and we don't have to wait as long risking people's safety. So I would like to move that forward and leave it for discussion. Thank you,
So there's a
Madam Mayor.
motion to suspend the rules in order to bring the... No suspension. You don't need a suspension? Okay, so we need to vote to bring it forward, and then we can have a discussion and vote it up or down.
Yes.
So I'm bringing this motion.
There's no motion needed to bring it forward. It's just an amendment.
It's just an amendment. She says it's just an amendment,
Just
so
an
we'll
amendment.
see.
Right.
So,
And if I would just say, Madam Mayor, before we get, if I put in November 1st, 2026, or we put in November 1st, 2026, because it was November 1st, 2027, if you feel that you need a little more time in November other than the 1st, then please make that clear and we can adjust it.